you both for joining me. I'm so excited to have this conversation today. Before we jump into the roundtable questions, I want to ask you both to introduce yourselves, and then we'll provide a little bit of background data that's going to drive the discussion today. And this is the survey that I shared with all of you ahead of time. So can I turn it to you for some introductions? Diya, I'll hand it to you first.
Hi, my name is Diya Bardwell. I am a current student at Syracuse University, majoring in policy studies and citizenship and civic engagement. I am from DC and worked a lot with the DC State Board of Education and the YMCA. Currently, I work with the DC chapter of the League of Women Voters, and I'm excited to be here for this conversation.
Awesome. Welcome, Diya. And Trenton?
Yeah, hi, my name's Trenton Eilander. I'm currently a college student at the University of Iowa in my junior year, working on my bachelor's of applied science with a strong emphasis on political science. Currently, I work at the Iowa State Capitol in the Iowa House Chamber as a legislative clerk, and I am also engaged with the Ronald Reagan Civic Leaders Fellowship this year, and so very looking forward to having this conversation.
Great. Welcome, Trenton. Thanks for joining us. So, as part of the work that I do as the Chief of Civic Learning Initiatives at the Institute for Citizens and Scholars, we conducted a survey called the Civic Outlook of Young Adults in America. It was the first of its kind national survey of over 4,000 18 to 24-year-old Americans that tried to shed light on three things we care a lot about at the Institute for Citizens and Scholars: civic knowledge, civic engagement, and commitment to democracy. So what did we find in our survey? There are some warning signs, as I see it, from my perch in Gen X, that Gen Z is really dissatisfied with our current political system and has some pessimism about our democracy. Young people seem to be lacking some critical civic knowledge that I think a lot of us hope you and your peers would have, as well as some lacking trust in government institutions. It also sounds like young people are less likely to vote in the 2024 election than the general American population as a whole. But there's also a lot of opportunity that we saw from the responses from young people in the survey. They show a lower degree of political polarization, say they're proud to be American, reject resorting to political violence as a solution, and collectively prioritize values of democracy. They talk about things like equality, fairness, and justice as critical values of democracy. We also think that that means Gen Z has great potential and motivation to strengthen our democracy, but it's up to us in the older generations to make sure that we're inviting you all into the conversation in meaningful ways. So we want to listen to, learn from, and work with members of Gen Z to better understand the results of the survey and what we do next. And so I'm really grateful that you joined me today to help me do just that. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and we'll just dive in and hear what you all have to say about these things. Our findings showed that a third of young adults are not currently active in any community organization or club and don't have an intention to participate civically or politically in elections in 2024. They say things like, no, I'm not going to put a yard sign out. I'm not going to campaign for a candidate. And I'm curious, does that resonate for you? Does that sound like things you've heard from peers? And what do you think might be contributing to this disengagement? And what can we do about it?
Personally, I resonate with that a lot. I think being a DC resident and not having congressional representation, especially, plays a lot into that. And I think this is not only something that DC has been a big issue, but also nationally. The idea that young people don't have a voice and that even if there are systems put in place to help engage that voice, is that it doesn't really matter. And a lot of times, especially in classes or just communicating with college students on campus, a lot of the time they blame it on certain aspects of our political system. So one that I've heard a lot is the Electoral College, where they just don't believe that that accurately represents their voice. And no matter what they do, no matter which way they vote, that it has no impact.
Thanks for that, Diya. Trenton, what about you?
Well, that's a big question, and I promise to keep my answer very short. But when I think about this, I think about our founding fathers that they believed that a nation of unimaginable source of like prosperity could guide an individual, a loving family and a caring government to allow freedom to fill our atmosphere in all the best ways possible. I think about younger people such as myself. They have to be encouraged about their passion for a community issue to get involved. when I think about that, that's the number one reason that I think, and I share that within people that I clerk with in the Iowa House and people in my community.
I like that. I like that. So not only does it matter that we have representation and that folks feel like that representation is actually representing them, but that they feel encouraged, that they feel like their passions are something that they can see play out in our democracy. And that really resonates for me. I'm curious that another thing we heard from young people in the survey is that they feel like one of the main hurdles to getting involved politically is that they don't feel well informed. And I'm curious, like, how do you think we should be helping you and your peers feel like you have the knowledge and information you need to feel confident engaging politically?
I think it really starts in high school and public education. I think the basis of how we form opinions is shaped so much around media and the people around us and the community around us that there's so much information coming in. It's really hard to figure out what we want in relation to all of this incoming information. And I think especially public high school curriculums and civic literature, civic engagement, community engagement in general is a really key stepping point into making sure that youth are actually engaging in democracy and doing so in a way that promotes it long term rather than just staying within that one high school curriculum.
Thank you for that. Trenton?
Yeah, for me, I would think about four things. First thing is that you need to get information from places other than social media. That can really trigger very fast, and it can go both ways. It can go good or it can go bad. Second is distrust of government might come from other social media posts, so making sure that your sources are reliable. Three, I would say learn how to find and use different information sources, which they teach us how to do in college when we're doing a research paper or so forth, making sure that our sources are reliable when it comes to policy and legislation coming down the aisle. And then number four, I would just say must be motivated to do so. So I would say today's civic knowledge is believed to allow opinions to guide character, but it should also allow character to influence public opinions. That's what I wanted to say. So I'm sure that we all can agree sometimes that our government, both on the state and federal side, may not keep us well informed as much as we like. And some of that may fall on us too by not reevaluating the sources and so forth. The answers are only important if we ask the right questions. So what questions are we not asking to keep all American citizens informed? And if well-informed citizens were to understand the importance of their civic duty, their confidence to engage in government will allow interest to spread deep and far for young people to be more engaged and understand the concept and passions that they have for policy, legislation, work that they want to do to increase our society for Gen Z.
I appreciate that from both of you. Go ahead, Diya.
Yeah. I agree with what most of you are saying. However, I do feel like the way information spreads around social media, one, I definitely agree there are a lot of issues with that. And it becomes a situation in which you're hearing an echo chamber that's really based around the beliefs that you project. But I also think social media is a really, really good tool if it's used the correct way. And I think the most important thing when discussing that is teaching young people how to actively engage with various sides of social media. So, for example, trying to explore outside of that echo chamber and intentionally using social media to seek outside sources. I think it is one of those things that can be a very, very helpful tool, but also do a lot of harm. And I think it's the way we educate people on how to use that that's really the determining factor. And I think, again, I agree with you. I think it's partly an individual choice, but I do think there are resources that we, as whether that's government systems, educational systems, whatever that might be, there could be more research and resources to, I guess, support people in going through with that mission.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I listen to both of you talk, especially about social media, this is a thing we think about a lot, right? So, what does it mean to be media literate in an environment where information tools change so rapidly? I'm going to show my own age here, but when I was in college, we didn't have Facebook. We really just started using email. So, watching that just over the past 25 years, the information environment has changed so incredibly fast. And I think now it changes month to month, right? New sites pop up, new opportunities, the way sites work change. I'm curious when you all are thinking, because I appreciated what both of you said about the potential and the risks of social media. When we're thinking about how to reach your generation, who is certainly more connected to social media than generations previously, are there things we should be thinking about as members of the older generations to be working with social media in a way that is productive to help get information to Gen Z? And or are there ways that you all are working with social media that we should know about that would help us understand how to prepare young people for using it?
Okay, I was just going to say that being a part of the Reagan Civic Leaders Fellowship program, the Midwest is very kind of like old fashioned. So like we use resumes, we use cover letters, and that's how we get a job. But being a part of the program, we learned about LinkedIn. And I has actually started using LinkedIn. I've learned what the process is, how it functions, and it has been fantastic. Now I know that you guys over there in DC and California and Texas, they all use this, and us from the Midwest, we've heard about it, but it's not something that we do because everyone knows everyone kind of thing. And so when we're trying to connect out to broader ranges, LinkedIn has definitely been great, Facebook as well, and then just the older generation still uses the newspapers. So just try to keep them informed on the articles that I write and I send out to the newspapers based on things that we're doing in the Iowa House. And people value that information. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit.
I like that. I think that's a good point too, Trent, that there's a combination of more traditional media and social media, and that we don't have to default to just one or the other. Diya?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that a really big thing is making interpersonal connections, and whether that's through direct one-on-one communication or just having an individual that can directly relate to whoever you're trying to reach. So, for example, you talk about like reaching Gen Z specifically so you can increase their engagement and keep that engagement going. I think one of the biggest things is saying, oh, I can find part of myself in this person or in this mission, and this is how I'm going to support it. Because when you identify, I think especially this is relevant with Gen Z and the way that social media is an echo chamber, as long as that individual can actually identify with a community or find empathy within that individual mission, I think that those spaces are a lot more likely to get engagement when it's directly like Gen Z to Gen Z.
I like
Yeah,
that.
I
I
like what you
appreciate it.
said. I actually wrote it down in my notebook. I just never heard that before. So.
I love it. I love it. This is awesome. So let me ask you about the upcoming election, because I think this is a question that we're grappling with based on the findings of this survey. In our survey, we found that over half of Gen Z isn't registered with either major political party in the US. And I'm curious, what impact do you think that's going to have on the upcoming election? And are there ways that the existing political parties, either the major two or third parties, could better be connecting with Gen Z about what's on your mind?
There are definitely a lot of systematic issues that are present within our current electoral system. And I think that stems from pretty much every level. I think that a lot of times when we're talking about engagement, we see that as volunteering within a candidate's particular party, or like whether that's the party directly or the campaign directly. But I think a lot of what gets missed in that, and I think at least in my personal experience and the people that I've directly communicated with, is that there is a great disconnect between volunteering and physically being there present and actually feel like you're being heard. I could show up to volunteer for a campaign and realize that I don't necessarily feel like this particular person or party, whatever, it represents me on every level. And I think that the fact that it is so closed off to discourse, even if you are continuously engaged, is a really big issue. I think that people have a lot of really, really great opinions on policies, and I definitely believe those should be heard, but it feels like a struggle to even get into that space in the first place. So physically being there and being involved doesn't always equate to being heard or being understood. And I think that a lot of Gen Z, again, this is just personal opinion and the way people that I've interacted with, but that has been a really big theme of I feel like I'm doing a lot to get engaged, but I still don't feel like I'm ever being heard for what my opinions are.
Thank you, Diya. Trenton?
Yeah, as I think about this, this is a very difficult question because I've heard this question asked in so many different forms from either college professors, from state or state representatives, state senators, the governor's office. And when I think about it, I can only make a conclusion that my generation, such as Gen Z, judges a party based on their techniques or attitudes that they use in order to earn votes. To be honest, I haven't really decided which one may be more important when it comes to political party. It's still something I'm kind of working on, serving in the Jasper GOP back in my hometown. But I think some of our predecessors of the past that have served the office of the president, such as Abraham Lincoln, my personal favorite president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, and Ronald Reagan, second favorite president, they come from different political parties. So that shows us that leaders can come from different political parties. And so their character of individual leaders, servant leadership, is important for Gen Z to understand. I would agree that this presidential election will be probably one of the most important presidential elections that we have to be engaged and honor, to be involved with for the three causes: individual liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and honor ourselves and who we are. So that's how I would answer that question, because I think it's so important to understand the difference between or even political parties when it comes to technique and attitude, because that shows character. And that's how you earn votes, is based on the stories that you provide to people that you engage with. And so I think those are two important factors.
Yeah, what I heard from both of you in that answer, which I think is really powerful and honestly not something I think gets talked about in relation to Gen Z, is both of you talked about the sort of personal connection to these questions of who gets your vote, right? So do I feel like these leaders represent qualities I care about, and how am I choosing that? And then do I feel like if I give them my time and my talent to volunteer and I'm not heard, that doesn't feel great, right? That I'm making a personal connection to my involvement in this. And I think that's a powerful thing. You have yourself to offer in addition to your vote. And thinking about how that might be received by politicians in elections, I think is really it's giving me a lot to think about. So I appreciate you both sharing that. So I want to be mindful of our time, and I want to ask two more questions of each of you. One is, our survey showed a really interesting contrast where 70% of the young adults who responded said they're proud to be American. And I will say I thought that was both heartening and higher than I thought. But 57% are dissatisfied with how they see our democracy right now. How do those findings land for you? What do you think might be possible to help young people feel more optimistic about our democracy?
I think this really plays into my previous answer about how we're able to evolve as a society, recognizing that you might be dissatisfied with the way your government is currently run and need to be dissatisfied with a certain part of it, but recognize the great lengths that we can go. The fact that we have the ability to move forward, and we have the ability to make ourselves better, and do that every year and do that in every election cycle. And I think that's at least where I can personally relate to that, where I can say, yes, I'm not satisfied with this, this, and this in our democratic processes and in our legislative processes. However, there's also this, and this that are really, really great. We are a democratic society, and we will continue to be a democratic society. And it's the way we're able to evolve from that dissatisfaction, I think, that leads to a lot of that optimism.
Thank you, Diya. Trenton?
I would say that politicians or people elected to office, probably a better phrase, should focus on fewer negative comments about the opposition and the opposing party's views, and more on what's positive about their own vision that they would like to see the government change, and why they should be supported by voting, like election integrity. That's what I would say.
I like that. So for you, Trenton, it sounds like a lot of this is about even the conduct of the people who are asking us to let them lead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's particularly powerful given your own work on the front lines, as it were, in a legislature, that you're getting to see sort of democracy at work every day. How optimistic do you both feel? I mean, Diya, you shared a little bit that there's a way you might frame optimism, but do you feel optimistic?
I do. I think that there are a lot of really great things about America and about the way our democracy is structured. I just think that we have a not so great history, and I think that there are ways to improve it, which help slowly correct those mistakes. And in every society, you're going to see mistakes. That's just how the way government works. And I think that the biggest part of American democracy is the way we're able to correct those mistakes. And I think for that reason in particular, I am optimistic.
I would say for me, very optimistic about the next generation, my generation. President Ronald Reagan told us that the best days are yet to come, that we are a shining city on the hill. I fully believe that, fully support the statement. I have it actually hanging on my wall, right up there. You may not be able to see it, but it's hanging up there. And so I read that every day when I go to work. But I think also it's important to be optimistic because us as young leaders, we need to celebrate the journey and not the finish line. I think that's a very valuable statement that I actually have in my notebook when I take notes, going to Bible studies, church on Sundays. That when we celebrate the journey, we're able to understand the person that we sacrifice in order to achieve something great, and that's what every great leader has done before us: Ronald Reagan, John F. Kennedy, Franklin D. Roosevelt, President Trump, Barack Obama, just naming a few leaders that are very well known. And it's a great example for us to live by. Folks like in our hometown that run our producers, like grocery stores, farmers. I work on the farm. We all see all these different commodities, manufacturings that support other people that are also may not be involved in government specifically, but their company plays a huge role in what we can do. So very optimistic about the future. That's why I'm striving to go to college and to be engaged in what ways I might try to bring value, and based on my perspectives that I've learned from older generations, such as my great grandfather, who's a World War II veteran, and some of that optimistic that may not have been shared.
Yeah, I thank you so much to both of you for this notion of celebrating the journey, thinking about the future, having a growth mindset about this. This is powerful. All right, so last important question for you both. What can generations older than yours do to make sure that Gen Z voices are not only heard, but taken seriously in policy discussions and political decision making, especially that which directly impacts you and your peers?
Personally,
Mostly, I need my marching orders. What should I be doing?
I think the biggest thing is having conversations like these. I think sitting down and taking the time to truly listen and have conversations where we talk about the struggles that Gen Z might be going through, the solutions to that, and how we can practically implement that. I think there are a lot of situations where there's maybe some spaces, but there's no action being taken from it, or there's no follow-up. And I think that is really the biggest thing, is listening to those conversations and listening to the people in Gen Z for specifically issues that impact us the most. And then making that a reality, is saying, this is what I'm hearing from this. This is how I can take my knowledge as someone who's been through this process, and this is how we can implement it for future generations.
I would say about older generations that they can do to make sure Gen Z voices are heard. I would say I think for a long time we have had some false advertising, so kind of echoing what she had said about making sure that our social medias are very accurate, I would say. But when it comes about policy decision, making sure that they're involved and know what's going on, which I know that can be very hard at some times when something that just gets passed from the Senate may go back over to the House, and lobbyists may not even have the opportunity to see it. But I think that there also should be some coverage from news that associate with the voters, that associate with the newspapers and so forth, that are actually keeping the citizens in their communities more informed about what's going on. And I think that's probably one of the biggest struggles that we face right now, is how do we keep communities, citizens in our state and the nation more involved on what's going on, what policies are actually happening that affect them daily. So echoing what she said, and just maybe adding a little bit more on that.
No, I appreciate that. Diya and Trenton, your conversation today with me, I've appreciated it so much. And I think what I'm taking away from this, three things I'm taking away. One, actively making the effort to have citizens, including Gen Z, be made aware of what's happening, what kind of decisions are under consideration, what do they need to know about it, and how do we communicate it in channels that reach everybody? So how are we thinking about that? That's one thing I'm really taking away from this. Another thing I'm taking away is the need to have more of these conversations, really, to make sure that if we believe that Gen Z has a role to play in maintaining and improving our democracy, we need to involve them. We need to be listening. We need to actually make good on what we hear by taking action. And then I'm also hearing that there is a lot of optimism and a lot of energy and motivation. It's about making sure that, and I'll own this myself, that older generations live up to being worthy of getting your engagement to continue and having that motivation for character and leadership in our country as we go forward. So I want to thank you both so much for your time and for all that you're doing as young leaders in your own communities. So thank you.